All right. My guest today is Benjamin Croc, the co-founder of BrioHR. For those of you who don't know, BrioHR is an HR tech platform that automates repetitive tasks and engages employees for maximum productivity. They are currently serving over 1,000 businesses across Southeast Asia. Thank you very much for being here, Benjamin.
Thanks for having me, Kevin.
So I always ask as a starting point, take me back to the origin. How did you decide to become an entrepreneur? And how did you lead towards the path of HR tech and Brio HR?
Yeah, I mean, it's really actually, I guess, unexpected. For example, why I say that is that 1 month before deciding to start BrioHR and to dedicate literally all my energy and time, at least professionally, to it, I would never have thought I would ever be an entrepreneur. So if I take a step back, I used to be a manager, a people manager. So I was managing large teams in the different companies I worked in or projects, and it was all about wondering, why do I not have this visibility? Why do I have nothing to really manage my teams better, make my people more productive, more engaged, and everything? And that really started from here, without being a tech guy, without being a wannabe entrepreneur, without being an HR guy. But at some point, it kind of clicked in a way where those pain points that I was experiencing as a manager, as a business unit manager, and so on, really, at some point came to my mind and grew into my mind to the point that I started writing features of a software that would be cool. And I even thought that at the time that I invented, the concept of these HR tools. So suddenly it became really bigger than me. Like from really, again, non-tech, non-HR, non-entrepreneur, the only thing I could care about and think about was to start this HR tech company, which is known as BrioHR. So it really happened suddenly in the year 2018, and that took me here. So very quickly, I aligned with my soon-to-be co-founder, with a friend of mine that I had met at INSEAD a couple of years before, and same for him. He was not necessarily an HR professional, but when we started talking and chatting about this project, this idea, it was very clear that despite both of us having very different professional experiences, we felt the same pain. We felt the same pain. So different companies, different environments, different countries, different everything, but the same pain. So that's really what got us to decide very quickly to just, stop everything we were doing at the time and start on the BrioHR journey.
Okay. And after INSEAD, you worked as a consultant, right? So how did that experience lend itself to being able to identify the playing point, understand the need that the market had, and really kind of develop that intent towards figuring out what you were going to build?
Yeah, that's really during this consulting stint with McKinsey that everything like came together. I can even link it to one specific, discovery chat with one client, a large company in the region, and we were there to help them reorganize their B2B division. So reorganize in terms of putting the right people in the right places to be, embracing the challenges of tomorrow, basically. And I remember, and again, we are talking about a large company, a large division with roughly 10,000 people. And I remember that when we arrived and did the typical consulting things, meaning asking questions first, trying to understand where we stand. For example, what are the processes you have in terms of HR and people management? Can you show us any flow charts, anything you might have? And then the answer was, oh, no, we actually don't have anything documented. We don't have flow charts and so on. So we were like, okay, no worries. We will help you with that. Can you maybe share with us an org chart? And the answer was like, actually, we don't really have an org chart up to date. Maybe we have one from 6 months ago, but 6 months ago in a company this size, it's outdated almost since 5 months, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then, okay, no problem. We will help you with that. You told us you were recruiting for very senior positions in that division. like really the top executives. Can you maybe share with us the job descriptions? What profile exactly are you looking at? And maybe we can help you refine, this search. Oh, actually, we don't have job descriptions yet, and so on. So, it's kind of when it clicked literally during that discussion. I'm like, how come I hear that companies want to engage their employees? Like really do better productivity, get people to express their full potential, and so on. When you don't even know how many people you have in your company to begin with, let alone knowing their interests, their skills, anything. So it's really when it first clicked that even companies like that, very large companies, which is not necessarily the target market for BrioHR. We are more on the mid market than on the enterprise segment. Even those companies who have money, who have an absolute need of being, fully digitized, at least for some of the areas, they didn't have any clue. So that's where I really felt there was a huge need, and that the pain I had experienced in my previous companies was something that many companies potentially were feeling. And maybe if I just finish, so we thought we had invented something with my co-founder, only to realize that it was indeed an industry that was existing, with the SAP of this world, the Oracle of this world, the Workday of this world when it comes to the enterprise. But yet we could see with our own eyes and our own experience that companies were not equipped. Even though it exists since decades, companies are just not equipped.
Is there any specific insight that you gathered in that discovery call as to why, if there was already the Oracles, the SAPs, those types of companies that are existing out there, why were those companies not signing up for it? Is there some sort of friction that you also realized that also went into kind of the initial building of BrioHR?
Yeah, I realized, like, over the following couple of weeks, basically, I realized that they had those tools. They had subscribed, and that the problem came from two levels of fragmentation. Fragmentation in terms of the tools themselves, like using something for that purpose, using something else for the other purpose, and so on and so on. So a lot of products who didn't necessarily cover the full employee journey nor communicate with each other well. And the second level of fragmentation was the people, like the divisions within that company were not necessarily communicating enough about what kind of tools, how to use them, and so on. And I think one of the reasons that didn't make it easy was also that those solutions, again, the SAP, Workday, Oracle, they are extremely heavy, extremely complex, and they are not geared toward the end user at all. They are geared toward the CEO. They are giant databases. We are not here to make it easy on the end user, which is the employee. So this doesn't help to really, help the whichever software, whichever application permeate throughout the whole organization. And that's exactly what we set on doing with BrioHR.
Okay. So you realize the lack of systems, you realize the need case around having the information and all of that, as well as understanding that whatever you were going to build had to be able to penetrate through the entirety of the organization to get the usability in order to get the impact and the results that the intention of these platforms are designed for. So then the next stage, I'm assuming, is you start deciding, hey, let's build an MVP and start putting a product together. Tell me a little bit about what was that MVP and what was the process like in building it in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, it was for sure tough. Again, we knew nothing, my co-founder and myself, about entrepreneurship. We are not supposed to be entrepreneur, at least me, until we actually became so. So we didn't necessarily have a lot of money and so on. Yet the product that we were envisioning is actually a fairly big, fairly ambitious product. Covering the full employee journey across multiple countries and so on, was very big. So the first thing that we had to be very clear on was indeed what to build first. We kind of knew, because of the size of the application we were about to give life to, if I may say, we were very clear that we had to go and raise a fairly early round of funding, a pre-seed, because we just were not developers ourselves. yet we wanted to build a complex software. So really the very first thing that we thought about in terms of the MVP was, what should we build to communicate our vision to the people who will talk to in order to raise a pre-seed round? We didn't want to come here with just a PowerPoint. We didn't have any track record of entrepreneurship, successful ventures, exits, whatever. So it was really about what will illustrate the best what we want to do that we can afford to build, which means it needs to be free or close. So the way we went about it is really like hustling to find, you know, some interns that would like basically to start the experience, who would help us build some stuff on, you know, like the mock tools like InVision or the likes. And there's some friends, some software developer friends, we would compensate them, but they were being kind with us in terms of the rates and so on. So that's really how we started to build something. And the very first you know, clickable thing, if I may say, I will not say MVP or anything sellable, but the very first clickable and showable thing was actually an org chart on the back of an onboarding, new joiner onboarding module. So that took us a couple of months, again, from scratch with no experience, even in software development, to get to something we could start showing, because we felt that the HR component, as opposed to the, you know, like admin component of HR, which maybe covers payroll, leave, and so on, we felt the HR component, new joiner onboarding, performance management, and so on, was closer to what we really wanted to do. So that's why we started with one of those modules. And the org chart, I don't know if you can link to my story before, but this big company not having an org chart, I found it like, that's a problem. That's a problem.
Yeah, it's quite interesting how many companies don't actually know what their headcount is, what the roles and responsibilities across departments is, how many people are in those departments, and all of the things that you would assume top level management would have kind of a handle on.
Yeah, exactly. It's really what we saw. At first, it was an hypothesis, but a documented one. And then, I mean, it's still truer than ever today, and we are trying to obviously fill the gap and solve that.
Okay. And then the new joiner, is that more on like the compliance and training side of it, where here's the company's policies and procedures, here's getting your payroll set up, all of those types of layers? Is that what that new joiner essentially was?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, in Southeast Asia in general, the turnover, the employee turnover tends to be way higher than, for example, in Europe.
Oh yeah.
For many reasons, including the dynamism of the economy, obviously.
Sure.
So by nature, it means that more people leave companies, more people join companies. And this tends to be a very overlooked HR process, but every company actually, or almost every company, need to manage it. And it's complex to manage, not in terms of individual tasks to be complex, but the entirety of the process involves maybe, depending again on the company, but 10, 20, 50 tasks. So if you have 50 tasks in a process that lasts maybe 3 to 6 months, you know, from the pre-boarding 2-3 months before joining the company, up to maybe the end of the probation period, it can be literally 3, 4, 5, 6 months, depending on the setup. So now, if you have many people at different stages at any point of time in this process, you quickly understand how much of a hassle it is for HR people to manage, even for the employees, the new joiners, managers, future managers. Then it's all about communicating documents, managing the timeline. When will the laptop be ready? When the training is supposed to take place, and so on and so on. So this is a pain that I clearly experienced when I was leading a shared services center in Malaysia. So fairly higher turnover than even the already high turnover.
Sure.
And really about processes and execution. So it was very important to have a proper onboarding, to get people to execute and to be ramped up as fast as possible upon them joining the company. So that's really where it comes from, and what it tries to solve. And that's the first thing we decided to tackle.
Okay. Okay. No, that's interesting. And when you look at the different roles within an organization, the onboarding process can become quite different as well. I'd have to assume if you're in a technical role, your computer and your laptop is going to be significantly better than if you're in a different type of role that doesn't require, or if you're in sales, for example, part of your onboarding is also what's the ramp up period on sales. There may be probationary periods. I imagine for large organizations, because of the high churn rate, but also for fast growing organizations as well, that it's pretty easy to lose track of these things. So not only can you kind of forget the probationary period, and then if somebody's not working out, now you have financial costs, all of these different sort of quantifiable impacts, right?
Yeah, definitely. And we had some examples of clients who said, before using BrioHR for their onboarding, they literally got new joiners and they had forgotten to get their bank details. And because they were fairly large companies with like heavy processes in order to update data in terms of timeline and so on, they just couldn't pay the first month of salary to that person. They had to pay it along with the second month during the second month. So it's a simple thing. Oh, we forgot to get your bank details. But actually, once again, I don't blame them. They might have, I don't know, 20, 30 people a month entering their onboarding, process. And if you multiply that over 6 months worth of onboarding, you have literally close to 200 people at any point of time being in the onboarding process, each of them at different stages and so on. I mean, it's complex, right? So definitely we help keep track of that. And there is no more, like PowerPoints that you exchange to fill up some information. Obviously, Excel, obviously, Word, even emails, everything can be centralized. So you know that everything about anyone, including payroll setup and so on, is in the same place, that you just have to type their name and find the information. So that's really literally day and night. And again, I think it's one of the most important processes in any company. Give the first impression that you want to give to your new joiners and so on. And I don't think it's given enough attention so far.
Yeah, I mean, I would even go to so far without having data to support with what I'm about to say. I would have to imagine poor onboarding procedures also impact higher churn rates because you're not giving the tools and the advantages, whether from a managerial standpoint or documentation standpoint, or all of these different factors that that get involved into the onboarding, that you're affecting the churn.
Yeah, completely. I mean, I remember my own onboarding in a company. I have many anecdotes of people sharing with me their onboarding. I was struggling every couple of hours to issue some reports because I felt that my colleagues like knew the numbers, and I didn't know how they did, but they knew the numbers very, very well. I mean, actual numbers, day-to-day, intraday numbers. So not something they've learned by experience, but something they had access to. So I had the tool. I was trying to run my own reports. And after maybe, 6 weeks, 2 months, someone basically told me, oh, but you're not in the distribution list. I'm like, what do you mean distribution list? Distribution list, this report is sent to many people every 2 hours, and you have a heat map of the numbers that matter across different divisions and so on. And I'm like, guys, I'm hired in a very fairly senior position, so it's okay. I can hold my own. I can find my way. I will not necessarily have an issue with that, even though I felt that I wasted so much time, and even it created a bit of stress, trying to catch up and so on in a totally new job. But as a senior, in a senior role, you find your way. I mean, it's fine. But in a more junior role, similar experience, I understand that someone would say, hey, it's not for me. Just because they were not properly informed about a few basic things. Oh, basically, you will need this kind of report. Then make sure you're on that distribution list. This is the kind of task. You mentioned the laptop before, but it can even go to the actual job things that are easy to share. But that if you don't, it will cause the new joiner to really live a very difficult first few weeks. And they can for sure right away decide that it's not the company for them.
So how then do you tackle that problem? Because I'm gonna venture a guess and say from company to company and from department to department that there's differences in the way that they approach the onboarding procedures and all of this. So when you're looking at being able to provide a service that can help automate that and enable better tracking, how do you get the onboarding of the client themselves, the company, the HR department, in order to be able to insert and plan out those different milestones through the onboarding process? Because I'd venture to guess that some of it's a combination of standardized and customized. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there is, I would say, there is one important thing, obviously, that is the platform itself. So we knew and we decided from the get-go to start with the hypothesis that the HR pain points were shared across industries, even across geographies, at least when it comes to things such as onboarding. So, of course, platform-wise, we had to build from the get-go, which required an upfront investment and even a cultural investment in the company in a way for many reasons, to have a platform that is as flexible as possible while remaining standardized for the sake of the business model itself, and also for the sake of good usability. Like the more flexible, the more complex
Sure.
it is to use. So we had to find the right balance to cater for all different use cases of different companies, different sizes, different industries, different countries. And within those companies, as you rightfully said, different departments and so on. So we need to build this platform. And at the same time, we always operate in a very consultative, almost consulting way, even though it's not an actual business line of us to do consulting. But in reality, we do consulting when we can to help our clients use some of our maybe pre-built onboarding processes, or even to suggest something that might work better than whatever they were actually doing and they might be struggling on. So there are those two layers which help maintain a healthy balance of flexibility, never customization. It's always like the engine is built in a flexible way,
Sure.
and at the same time helping them.
Mm.
Why? Because we are talking to thousands of HR people every year. So we know the best practices about this or that process. At least we have heard about different ways to handle different situations and so on. So we are always very happily sharing this and helping our clients, configure these kind of things if they need it, if they ask us, and so on.
Okay. Okay. So then moving forward as the company progresses. So you have the org chart, you have the onboarding. How do you go to market and get your first customers? What was the tactic that you took in order for getting those initial customers? Because oftentimes in this part of the world, people are wary of startups when they're onboarding new softwares.
Yeah, I mean it's true, and I think it would not come as a surprise to many entrepreneurs, but it was really through hustle.
Mm.
And by that I mean, so the fun story is that we built the platform in a way that was that we were able to launch it, to commercialize it really in March 2020. So if you remember what was happening at the time, like literally, I think on the 16th of March, or I mean, throughout the month of March in many countries, there were the COVID lockdowns.
Yeah.
Just as we were starting to commercialize, we had started meeting, some prospects and so on that we had found in February and so on. But just as we were starting to commercialize a bit the old way, I would say, like starting by literally show up and at events, talk to people, go to their office, do an in-person demo, and so on and so on. So right away, we couldn't do that. But obviously, we still had, a network and a network's network, if I may say, and that's really what we pushed for. So we found those people who understood our vision for the platform, even though not everything was there, not everything was in place at the time, not everything was as good looking as today, because we have an amazing like interface and everything. But let's be clear, when it very first started, it was a bit more simple, I would say.
Sure,
um,
sure.
but still, a lot of people were were appreciative of our real intention to help, like not copying on something else or someone else, but really go from them to build, in sequence, the different features that we wanted to build and so on, focusing on what mattered. Even if that's something, even if that's an industry that existed before with a lot of players to copy from, we didn't. We were, of course, looking at what was done and so on, but we really worked by talking to our clients, like really 100% of the time, all the time. And this helped us gain the initial trust. As you say, it's a market where sometimes startups, even still today, even though maybe less today, let's say, but up to a year ago, a couple of years ago, it was a question that we had to face. Yeah, but you're in startup. How can we be sure, and so on? But then people who could see first how committed we were to solving their pain, and then they were actually seeing in real time the product evolving towards something that was more and more useful to them, helped again our network and our network's network. I'm not talking about friends, but I'm talking about people you could reach out to in one. Constituted our initial base of clients. We also started to make some to communicate, I would say, online very early on. I remember this very first event we showed up to, which was in April 2019. So 1 year almost before we even started to have something to commercialize. Where we just printed a nice banner showcasing our product, which was obviously fairly basic 1 year before being sellable. And we started once again meeting people, gathering interest, understanding the pain, and so on and so on. So we had to do a few PowerPoint-based demos, on the following few months. But it also helped us, get some visibility, starting to build an online presence on LinkedIn or even on Google and so on. And I'm talking fully organic stuff. But at least we got started earlier. So when we actually started to sell our product, many actually thought we were not that new of a company.
Okay. So you kind of tricked the market a little bit by putting the name out there before the product was saleable. So it started building that. I don't want to say trick. Maybe I should take that back. But there's an aspect of going from awareness to intent when you're talking about building a brand of a company and getting those marketing channels in order. You really need that awareness, which takes time.
Exactly. It takes time. And honestly, once again, we didn't know really what we were doing. At the time, we were just starting 1 year before having our first client and so on. So we never really said we have a product, pay something and then take 1 year to build it and so on. It was always more sharing our mindset. Because we already had the mindset and the culture of the company at the time, which was really like I like this tagline. I think it's from a HubSpot customer service, but which is solve for the customer. The idea is to understand the actual pain behind what's happening, what is being asked, and so on, and go beyond, basically. So it was more this actually that it helped build. And then we were very clear that, hey, the product is right now in a non-usable version. It could be by that time. In the meantime, would you be okay to meet with us and go a bit deeper with us in terms of what would help you? So it's really what we did. We didn't, I would say we didn't fake it until you make it. We were just like, talking to people and openly sharing our vision of people management, our vision of HR, and our vision of the platform that we were at the time still building.
I imagine that inclusiveness and continuing those conversations and structuring it so that you're providing updates and periodically continuing the engagement played out quite well. You did mention something earlier, and you alluded to it again just now, of talking about what your vision on people management is. And previously you talked about sharing what the product features that you wanted to build are. And so I'm curious of how, when your starting point is one thing, and then you start thinking about what the product roadmap ought to look like, what do you want to build? Can you tell me a little bit about the logic around how you decided the roadmap, how you prioritized it? When you're having these sessions, did you utilize that to reprioritize, adjust, and then ultimately leading up to kind of launching them and in sequence?
I mean, the roadmap, I believe, is one of the toughest challenge for any
Mm,
entrepreneur. I
sure.
remember when starting that, and I've heard that from many others, that you fear not having enough ideas
Mm,
to fuel this roadmap and to fuel basically your company as you go. So it's not only product, but it's many things. Um, and what we have experienced is it's the answer that I usually heard at the time when I was hearing I'm afraid of not having enough ideas. That the problem is not about having ideas; it's you will have so many that you will struggle prioritize.
mm,
And that's actually what has happened. So we if I start once again at the beginning, we kind of invented all-in-one HR platform, and I'm saying that a bit, naively, and I'm okay to say that because it was existing already for decades, but we didn't know. We just didn't know. So what I mean by that is that we were already from day one or from day zero super clear about what the platform should look like.
mhm,
Obviously, we learned so much, and it made us adjust and constantly readjust on the roadmap, the exact sequence, the exact features that we may have thought about differently earlier on, and so on and so on. So obviously, we have this constant thing. But if I summarize the way I see it, it's what we apply to Brio, it's about really finding the balance between what interests you. What do you want to be building? Because it's tough to build. What do you want to be building? And this I will never compromise. I will never be doing what I've done for the past 4-ish years if I was not absolutely passionate about every single day of the roadmap.
mm,
So that's for me the first non-negotiable, whatever feature. And the second thing, of course, because I talked about the balance, the second thing is knowing that how do you make a healthy, thriving company? And obviously, this links to the clients. So to give an example, we really first started with HR modules. So I
mhm,
mentioned the onboarding. We had discussion around performance management. We had discussion about recruitment. Um, but in Southeast Asia, especially, payroll, for instance, is an absolutely necessary part of HR,
mm,
or at least of an all-in-one HR platform, let's say.
sure.
So even though we wanted to focus on the HR aspect, we knew that we had to build payroll, and we balanced it. So we started with onboarding, performance, talk to clients, built our brand around this, built our credibility as well around those, and then starting to build payroll. Then, of course, payroll, especially when you cover multiple countries as we do and so on, it's very, you can go very deep. So when we knew that payroll was an enabler to our HR modules and so on, we really went deep in payroll because again we knew why we were doing that. We knew what benefit to the company and what progress towards our mission. Really to the people component and so on. It was bringing to go deeper in payroll. So it's constantly a balance, but yeah, again, HR I know not payroll, and then the what we call the admin automation, so payroll, leave management, expense claims, and so on. So all the slightly more transactional things, but which are extremely core and important to every single company. We were just adding the other layer, and we wanted to even the internal culture of the company to be aligned that we are not an HR admin company like many, but we are an HR and people management company. Even though in the end you have similarities in terms of the modules you build, in terms of features you build, you still have some differences in terms of how you build your sales, your support, your communication online, everything basically around the product.
Mm, mm. So when you're talking about the payroll side, just to kind of delve into that, it's a really complicated one. So if it's an expectation that it's included, when you start talking about geography to geography, and even some countries within the different provinces or states or however they term them, you have different tax rates, you have different requirements, it's etc. How do you manage that in keeping with the standardization so you don't let the development costs and the levels of localization get a bit out of control?
Yeah, I mean it's a big challenge, but that we love. We again we started. I mean, we started a company, so
Mhm.
I guess that's true for many, most, if not all, entrepreneurs. Knowing or at least quickly understanding that it was going to be a challenge. So obviously we like challenge, but we also from day one knew that we wanted to cover multiple countries,
Mhm.
starting with Southeast Asia, APAC. So everything we've done, and in fact, the March 2020 lockdown, when we were just starting to commercialize, helped us in a way with that. Everything we've done, everything we have structured in the company was to cater for multi-country while remaining efficient because we didn't have the resources of a big multinational.
Mhm.
So the product from the get-go was built and architectured, which is not easy, and which
Mhm.
is, I don't think it's really possible if you have not thought about it from day one or day zero again.
Right.
But the product was built in a way that could be adapted to multiple countries. So there are modules which are less dependent on localization than payroll. We
Mhm.
still build them in a way that they could cater for different best practices from country to country, because there are differences in terms of best practices. It's not law, it's not regulations, but different best practices, different ways to handle performance management and so on.
Mhm.
So when it comes back to payroll, it was kind of the same from the very beginning. At first there is something that I think illustrates this fairly well. Our first three real users. I'm not saying paying clients, slightly
Mhm. Okay.
before March 2020.
Early
The
days.
first three real users were still three super legit companies.
Mm.
Things that many startups would say, oh, no, 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 don't start with that. It's too complicated. One was a company which is a super fast growing fintech in Singapore, close to 50 employees. One was a fintech in Indonesia, more than 100 employees already when they started using BrioHR. And one was what I call a traditional SME in Malaysia with 300 employees. So from day one, the feedback we would receive, the feedback we would seek was coming from three companies in different industries, each in one country, with different levels of complexity, different practices, and so on and so on. So we built the entire BrioHR can-do culture, I would say,
Mm.
in this mindset, which was not easy. It's not the easiest choice. You'd rather
Sure.
maybe choose a smaller niche and
Mhm.
to serve a simpler subset of companies,
Right.
and then maybe play the user game a bit more rather than being ready to literally expand to the region. But we decided to do otherwise. We decided to to do everything we could so that we know what it is to go international in Southeast Asia with different set of companies.
Okay. Okay. So when you sell internationally, is all of that activity coming from the home base in Malaysia, or did you have to set up local teams to be the kind of the on the ground force to push it out into the market?
Uh, Today we have mostly two countries where we have teams, like local teams, which are Malaysia and Singapore.
Okay.
But we have clients in more than 10 countries. And all those came, via online and online implementation, online support,
Mm-hmm.
online everything. But we believe that as we are, expanding deeper and deeper in the region, we actually believe in local teams.
Okay. And so sticking with that theme of plans going forward, what is next for BrioHR? And I guess I'll add a little bit of an open-ended question on top of that, which is how would you define success to know whether or not you're doing the right things?
So the next steps would be really to push further in terms of internationalization. We have always considered our starting countries, Malaysia and Singapore, but a bit more Malaysia because that's where most of our ops are, as great product market fit countries, right? So we didn't want to expand too much across the region because we didn't want to spread ourselves too thin, considering we had startup resources. Yet,
Sure.
we wanted to build our knowledge, our experience, and our foundation to expand in a country that was, again, close to the other countries, even though each country in the region, as we know, is different, closer as possible to what we will find when we go to other countries. So right now we are really in this phase of heavier internationalization. We are about to launch Indonesia payroll very soon. We are pushing also in already our own countries of Malaysia and Singapore. And we have built everything so that we can expand to the other countries very fast. So that's the next step is really about this. When it comes to defining success, I think it comes in two ways. First, the input. So in terms of input, we wanted from the get-go to build a sound business that was able to cover the full region. So it's very into what I said earlier. We want to accomplish this internationalization, and we have put everything in place, the foundation, in order to be able to do that. But now we are executing on this. The second aspect, of course, is more the output, like the mission in a way that we set for ourselves. And for us is to serve and really help companies in the region to really have a better grasp of their people and to really help their people express the maximum of their potential for both the need of the companies and of course for the people themselves. Quantifying that, I mean, we are often referring to more than 1 million users, so 1 million employees. Obviously, in the long term, we want to do more than that, but we would feel happy. We will feel happy the day we can celebrate this milestone.
Okay. Now this has been hugely insightful in order to get a better understanding on how you came to launch, how you've navigated throughout this process. But let me wrap up here with the standard closing questions that I ask everyone. And so the first one is, what is a tech tool that you just cannot live without?
I do those ways qualify? For me, ways is and will maybe not forever be, but so far has been honestly the one tool I couldn't do with no proper alternative and so on.
Yeah.
Especially maybe
Having the
where I live.
directions to get from one meeting to the next is without a doubt necessary, especially in tough traffic cities.
Yes, it remains a very traditional app in a way, just because it's super established for quite some time.
Yeah.
But it still remains the one that I never forget to turn on.
Very cool. Last question here. If you were to talk to another startup founder that's just getting going, what would be the biggest piece of advice that you could offer?
I think there is something that I learned from attending YC, Y Combinator, and I like that, especially them seen and known as being those crazy investors want to invest super early to get the most money possible in the end and so on.
Sure.
But there is something that they discuss and that they highlight a lot, which is staying power. So the point is, don't necessarily listen too much to people around you, to TechCrunch headlines, to VC saying no, whatever it is. If you are not delusional, meaning that if your project actually brings some value to someone, and that you can harness enough of that value to make it profitable, to make it growing, and that you enjoy running as a business, then really the point is just keep at it. Watch the cash, make sure you don't run out of cash, however big or small your burn is, whatever, watch it. Make the decisions that you need to make, however tough they are, but
Mhm.
just stay in the game. Stay in the game, be happy in the end, however tough it was, however big the business becomes, however small it is. As long as you're not delusional, embrace the journey and just stay in the game. Stay in the game. And if there is potential for this business and you work hard at it, it will happen. And I think this really resonated with me a lot because it's a simple thing that we tend to forget. You know, oh, if you're not a unicorn or whatever, within the 4 years, you're a failure. Why? Because it's all what people are talking about. If you're not in generative AI right now, we are not in generative AI. Of course, we already leverage a lot of it in the product and in the, I would say, back office operations.
Sure.
But if you're not right now, honestly, there is no room in the news for you. Who cares? Who cares?
Yeah, it's the hype cycles of TechCrunch. Don't worry about everything that you're reading
Yeah,
in there. All the doom and gloom of the VC winter and all of these different
exactly.
things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Some people are still building chairs for you to sit. It's not
Mm.
generative AI, it's not tech, but they have built great businesses for most.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
if you like it and there is potential, just be careful that there is potential, however, again, small or big or not,
Right.
just stay in the game. And
Yeah.
it really changes your mindset, like, okay,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's fantastic advice because the pathway towards unicorn oftentimes is being able to repeat funding round after funding round, but oftentimes as you get further along, it's based upon some of the hype cycles as well. Different industries fall out of favor by no fault of the business owner, but if you have something durable, things come back. The idea is just kind of staying there. And if you fall off of it, so what? If you've built a meaningful business and you're happy with where you're at and what you've done, then it doesn't really matter if
yeah,
you want to if you don't stick on that path anymore.
definitely. Maybe a good tip could be to listen to podcasts about traditional, or let's say non-tech business builders, and let them tell you 20 years, 30 years after
Mm,
that these 10, 12% year over year growth actually led to something super big in the end, and that they like
yeah.
building,
Maybe that's an idea for a future episode of this podcast is to get a couple of those types of entrepreneurs that built
Yeah,
long-lasting businesses that maybe aren't the VC sexy, but ended up becoming quite sizable anyways.
yeah, exactly. And of course, it's not to choose one or the other. It's just to say that the outcome will be good. Obviously, you want to go, especially when you're VC backed, you want to go as fast as big and so on. But just that, there are good outcomes no matter what.
Absolutely. Well, Benjamin, this has been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate you sharing. And I think that advice is a great way to end the conversation on a very high note. And I hope every entrepreneur takes it to heart.
Thanks a lot for having me again, and thanks for the discussion, Kevin.
All right, that wraps it up for another fantastic episode of the Sea of Startups. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. Go onto iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review. It's the best way for us to get discovered and to have these startup stories reach a broader audience. If you have any suggestions or would like to get in touch, you can email me at kevin@indelible.vc. As always, I'm your host, Kevin Brocklin from Indelible Ventures, and this is the Sea of Startups.